Okay, so it's just after 3 o'clock. We will go ahead and kick this off. Welcome everyone to another session of the CAPED's AT-SIG Spotlight Series. Today we are sitting with Texthelp, and we have representatives from Texthelp with us here today. We have Linda Walker, who is joining us from, Linda, I didn't ask where you're from. Where are you at right now?
Home is Fort Worth, Texas.
Texas.
So in the other big state.
Yeah, yeah. And then we have Emma Fish, who is, I believe, from San Francisco, right?
Yeah, hello from San Francisco.
And then we hope to have Rachel Cruzel join us here in a few minutes. She is literally stepping off of a plane. She had some flight, so she plans on joining us when she can. And then sitting to my left, your right, is my colleague Francesca Gillens. So welcome to this Spotlight Series with Texthelp. Just a couple of announcements. We were with you a few weeks ago. We talked about our CAPED scholarship. Our CAPED offers scholarships to students at the community college as well as Cal State's and UC schools to support their continuing education. The scholarship application is up on our website, caped.co, and you can go to the CAPED website to get that scholarship application for one of your students. And the award is a $500 scholarship to purchase assistive technology of their choice. So often it's further a subscription for software, or maybe a specific device that they need as they're transferring or just continuing in at the school they're at. At this point, I will turn it over to you, Linda, and you should be able to share.
Okay, I am a K-12 person to the core. Was in public education for 30-something years. So every smart thing that I know about higher ed is something one of y'all have taught me or Rachel has taught me. And if I say some dumb things about higher ed, that's totally on me, because I really just didn't have a whole lot of experience supporting those learners the way you guys do. So there is Rachel's contact information. Rachel is our higher ed specialist, and she is absolutely phenomenal because she served in a role very similar to probably many of you. But I added my contact information on there in case I say something dumb and you need to let me know. But kind of what Rachel had outlined for us is kind of really talk about that literacy piece with our Read and Write and OrbitNote tools, and then do a little conversation about Equatio, which is our math support product. So she put together.
Hey, Linda?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm here if you want me to take over, if you want.
That is awesome. Rachel, would you like to take over?
I'd love to take over if you'd like.
Okay, I am going to stop sharing and give you all Rachel, who is the expert. Look at her. She looks so calm, cool, and collected.
Did you give them the backstory of where I've been, Linda?
We just said you had flight delays.
I had major flight delays and I just got off a flight. So I am going to share my screen so that you all can see what Linda was going to start chatting with you about, and I will take over from here. All right, let's cue this up quick. Let's talk a little bit about higher ed students. And just to give you background and context, if I haven't met you, hello, my name is Rachel Cruzel. I am our higher education specialist. So I get to spend all day, every day working with college professionals such as yourself, which is where I have been today and yesterday. So please reach out if you have questions. I've got my contact information at the end, as well as Linda just shared it as well. So I'm sure these stats are nothing new for you all, but we've got somewhere around 37% of students who have a disability. Hang on, let me go back. Let me move there. There we go. What a recent study has shown, based on the education department, most recent research has shown that 37% of students with a disability reported their disability to their college, which means that actually a large number of students that we work with aren't actually reporting that disability. So despite all of the great work that you're all doing, a lot of students aren't reaching us. In addition to that, we find that somewhere around 70% of students who have mental health disabilities aren't registering for accommodations either. So we've got large numbers of students who just aren't making their way to our office, aren't able to get those resources and supports. In addition to that, we're also finding just the students coming into our college campuses today are really struggling when it comes to core academic functions across things like being able to read and write, despite the fact that they are a student with or without a disability. We're finding things that like 95% or so students with a disability, compared to about 90% of students without disabilities, are reporting one of these limitations. So they're struggling with reading, they're struggling with writing, they're struggling with note-taking. In addition, some recent studies that have been done from EDUCAUSE that are talking a little bit about student satisfaction with technology shows that we've got a lot of room to grow at our institutions around what students have access to for technology, specifically around students with disabilities. They're finding that, we can beef up the support that we are providing to them technologically as a way to support them academically, and also just with accommodations as well. And then paired with all of this, I'm sure nothing new, we've had a huge flip in the number of students who are taking online courses. Obviously, in the early 2010s or so, we had many more students who were taking the majority of their classes as in-person versus online. Obviously, we had a massive flip of that during COVID, and now, as of kind of 2 years ago, most recent studies that we've got show over 54% of students are actually taking more than one of their courses online, if not one or more. So we've got this complexity going on with our students, and this kind of co-occurrence going on with our students with disabilities coming in less prepared, feeling like they could use some extra technology to support them, all while learning online. And so what my goal is for the next little bit is to give you just a taste of sort of what some of the tools are that Texthelp has in order to kind of support these learners that you're directly working with or potentially working with kind of across campus potentially. So let's start with Read and Write. Read and Write is going to be that literacy support tool that's going to most benefit that kind of reading, writing, comprehension, and studying aspect of being a student. So I'm sure you can all think of text-to-speech tools out there, but that's kind of what ours is essentially. It's going to have a lot of the same features and functionalities that we see in these tools, but our tool works a little bit differently in how we engage with course content, which is where we really are kind of set apart. It's toolbar based. So on my screen here, I've got this kind of graphic of a toolbar, and this toolbar is going to go into the different learning environments that students are actively engaging with. Websites, documents, PDFs, learning management centers, you name it, our tool typically goes in there and can access content. Knowing that we've got a variety of different students who have preferences with the type of device that they come to campus with, different platform preference of where they like to work, we do have a variety of different versions of the tool that kind of boils down to the fact that students are going to be supported no matter where it is that they're learning and working on what kind of device. We see most commonly students using either Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge extensions, just because so much of the content that students are engaging with is going to be online, and these tools work directly in those places that students are already learning and working every day. Likewise, we're seeing students come in from K through 12 having so much robust knowledge of these versions of tools, as opposed to kind of those more traditional installable versions of our tool, which we do also have versions of that as well. So if students need that support, if students prefer that support, we do have that as well. And we've got some kind of abbreviated versions of our tools that do work in kind of our tablet, iPhone, iPad environments as well. Okay. Now, with Read and Write, there's kind of a bonus program, is sort of what I like to call it, or sort of a sibling program to Read and Write. This Read and Write tool is going to do, like I mentioned, a lot of that literacy support. But when it comes to PDF files, I'm sure we all know working in this field, the PDF files are kind of very particular document types. It can be kind of challenging to engage with them. And that's where this tool OrbitNote comes in. Essentially, the easiest way to describe it, the way that OrbitNote looks today, is it is Read and Write for PDF files. It's a web application, which just means it's going to work on websites. It's going to work on the web, I should say, and it's going to allow for that same toolbar set to work with PDF files. And we'll dive into this in just a couple minutes, and I'll actually kind of get you to see what it looks like. But as I mentioned, it's a web application, which just means it works on web browsers. Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge are the primary two that it works in. We do have some students who are able to get it to work on things like iPads. But don't worry, if you have students who prefer to work more on the desktop of their computer, we do have our legacy PDF reader built in there still as well. The key is that we just are doing some radical development with this, again, to meet those learners with that online learning that they're constantly doing, okay? So with that said, I'm going to hop in and actually start showing these tools for a couple minutes, just so that we all can kind of maximize our time together. So let me reboot my website here. So I've just got a very basic website here. It's the National Park Service. I'm in almost summer mode myself, planning summer vacations. And if I'm needing to, for example, read some of this content out loud, I can quickly and easily just click on the Chrome extension. And what's going to happen is this is going to pop up on my screen here for me. Let's see if it pops up on screen here for me, if it's being a little laggy. There we go. And this toolbar literally just floats on top of my website. And this toolbar is going to follow me to any of these different learning environments that I'm going to be learning and working in. So if I'm needing something like this first paragraph read out loud, all I need to do is click and highlight with my mouse, and then using my play button, I can go ahead and have it played out loud.
How do ecosystems change over time and what causes those changes? This important basic science question can be difficult to answer because ecosystems are large and complex. And it's not easy to perform experiments on something the size of, say, a mountain range.
You're going to have that dual synchronous highlighting or that dual color highlighting, which is going to help with things like tracking and focusing and following along. And what we can do is actually go into our settings menu and also do things like change the voice and the speed as well. We have a whole bunch of different voices and dialects and different languages, which are going to meet those learners where they're at, as well as speeding it up and slowing it down based on kind of their needs when it comes to comprehension and listening. Okay. Our settings menu is pretty robust. It's got lots of different ways that students can tweak and kind of customize how they want the toolbar to look and feel and kind of interact with their course content. Much like other literacy support tools out there, we've got things like built-in dictionaries and single word translators, for example, that students can lean on if and when they need some type of kind of comprehension support. But we also do have the ability to do things like have our highlighters as well. So dual synchronous highlighting or dual color highlighting is a great way for us to go through and kind of find things like the most important points, those main ideas, those supporting details, maybe some things like vocabulary words that I might need to study and review later on. And then I can do things like using our collect highlight button, actually collect these and order them, organize them either by color or by position in the document. And actually, when I click OK, it'll create a new document for me, either attached to my Google Drive or my Microsoft OneDrive account that I'm logged in with, for me to review later for a test or potentially to study from or write a paper project, etc., which is nice. It'll tell us where it came from. It won't give us the citation information. If you do have students who clicking and highlighting to read content can be a challenge, we do also have our hover speech button, which allows me to simply click on it, allow me to hover my mouse over words, and it'll read out loud to me too.
But on the east side of the park, urban areas, industry, and agriculture inject various pollutants into the air.
We do also have our screenshot reader tool too. So if for some reason this text was not visible to something like a text-to-speech tool, I could always use the screenshot reader tool to click, drag a box around course content and have that read out loud as well on the fly. Okay. A couple other features I really like to mention out on the web, especially as it applies to kind of more complex learning environments. We do have a feature called Simplify. This is obviously a really nice, friendly website that doesn't have a lot of distractions and text and whatnot. But if this website was, I could go ahead and click Simplify Page. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull that text into a much more user-friendly learning and reading environment. It's going to pull in any relevant pictures, as well as give me the ability to use those same read and write features that I had before, as well as some additional ones as well. This can be great for our students who have low vision. We can do things like invert text color. We can make the font bigger or smaller. We can actually change the font to something that maybe is more useful for me based on my learning. And then one of the features that I'm actually really excited to share with you all about, and is kind of a hidden gem of our tool, is this AI beta feature. You know, AI is sort of all the rage right now in higher ed, and we are doing some really kind of strategic work at Texthelp around how do we infuse AI into our tools in a way that's really student-centered and is going to help them. This AI beta feature, when I click on it, is actually going to go through and it's going to simplify this reading based on AI and give me just sort of a shorter, more condensed overview version of this reading so that I can get kind of that background information of what this reading is talking about, kind of build that schema of what it is that I might be trying to understand. If and when I'm done reading this, I can simply click and it's going to go away, go back to what kind of the entirety of the reading is, and I can go ahead and read from there. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm going to start to flip really quickly just to talk about Canvas because I know that that's something that's really important to you all. All of these tools are going to carry with us and do the same functionality and support in something like your learning management system, Canvas. So if I'm in a page such as this one here, which is kind of our overview course reading, I again can click on my extension. It's going to pop up on screen here, and I'm going to be able to do that same interaction that I did before with having course content read out loud by clicking and highlighting and clicking the play button, or having words defined, for example. And this can go into other environments as well, places like discussion posts where I can actually read, listen to, interact with the discussion post with my tools, as well as have some of those writing-based supports, which I haven't even talked about yet, to do things like be able to craft my responses actually in the environment I'm working in. So many students, when it comes to kind of doing course assignments and discussion posts and writings within an LMS, these tools that students are needing don't always transfer and work super seamlessly in these places. So they're having to do some of the creation in places like a document, whereas Read and Write really allows a student to stay in the native environment that they're working in and be able to engage as is with the tools to do things like use our talk and type feature, which is our dictation tool, to be able to actually speak out, be able to actually hear what they've typed and edit it live in screen as opposed to having to flip through windows. So this can be really nice as well. Any questions on Read and Write? I'm looking at the chat here. Steve asked, does this tool work with a lockdown browser? Steve, we do have the Windows version of Read and Write, which does work with Respondus. I will say that some of the other lockdown browsers, depending upon kind of how your admin has it set up, as well as what kind of lockdown browser you do use, there are ways that schools have found Read and Write to be used with it. So I would say if you want to send me an email letting me know what your lockdown browser is, I could potentially try to get you some more information based on kind of conversations I've had with schools. And Claudia Proctorio, I don't want to speak and guarantee that it works with that, but if you shoot me an email as well, or actually here's what I'll do. I'll take a picture of your questions right now, and I can follow up as well with it. So let me just do that. Got a picture, so I can reach out to you as well. Any other questions kind of come into mind? Okay, I'm going to move on to OrbitNote just for a couple minutes before we dive into the math tools and then get into more of our discussion, which I want to make sure we spend plenty of time with. Okay, so I mentioned OrbitNote as kind of being Read and Write for PDFs, and that's kind of our simplistic way of describing what OrbitNote is today. All I need to do to get to interact with PDF files, the kind of one file format, one type of course material that or Read and Write kind of can't get at because of the way they're structured, OrbitNote's going to be able to take care of. So students can just head to orbit.texthelp.com. They'll be prompted to sign in. And once they get there, they're going to have this dashboard. From here, they're going to be able to do things like drag and drop or choose a file PDF, or this will actually connect to their Google Drive or OneDrive account that they're signed in with. So it's really nice and easy for students to just hop on the web and go. From there, once we get a PDF loaded in, this is what it looks like. This is just a PDF of a biology textbook. And what I've got at the top here is going to be the same toolbar set essentially that Read and Write is. So students who struggle with cognitive load are not going to have to feel like they're learning a different tool. They really just need to know how to open those documents. Those same rules kind of apply, those same functions apply as before. So if I want content read out loud, I can click and highlight it and click the play button. I can do things like have words defined, for example, using the dictionary. I've got those highlighters in here as well. When I click out of the document, all of this is automatically going to save in here and reopen the next time I come in. And then there's also some additional annotation features as well that we can build in here because the PDF is kind of in this environment. The first one being a text tool. So I, as a student, can actually do things like leave notes in the margin for myself or leave a note to talk to my faculty, for example. I can do things like resize it, make the font bigger or smaller, change the color, and or we can also do things like have some of those writing support tools as well, like being able to actually dictate my answer and hear it played back as well. We have a similar tool called the pushpin tool, which allows me to do the same thing. But if and when I close out of it, it's actually going to give me a little pushpin here on screen, which just tells me, hey, there's something here that I might need to look at later on. We do also have things like freehand drawing, which allows me to do things like circle or draw kind of on screen using either my mouse, my touchpad, or I have a touch screen, so I was able to just do my finger. And then last up, we do have a shapes tool as well. So maybe let's do this square in green because this is an important paragraph up here at the top. So I'm able to really interact with my documents and really kind of make them my own and engage with them in a meaningful way to help with that comprehension. We start to kind of take this to kind of the next level. We can do things like assignments and assessments within OrbitNote and be able to use those same annotation tools to do things like complete tests from kind of the testing center perspective or complete assignments and download these and share them back with our faculty. Obviously, we can do things like type in letters for matching. We can use the freehand drawing tool to match up answers, shapes for things like true and false, and be able to type again those short or long answer responses using that typewriter tool, again with those writing supports built right into the document here. Last thing I'm going to show you with OrbitNote, everything to date comes with Read and Write, but we do have a premium version of OrbitNote that comes with a couple extra features, which some disability resource professionals really like having for students. The first one is going to be a OCR scan tool, optical character recognition scan tool. As much work as we're all doing to make sure all of our course content is accessible and all of our PDFs on campus and documents are accessible, what we find is that there's always going to be some documents here or there that just get missed, and or when students are doing that independent study online for research or projects or papers, they're coming across PDFs that aren't always that are image-based and not scanned. So if a student brings in a PDF that is image-based where we can't get at the text, we can get this kind of error message on screen with the premium version of OrbitNote that says, let's scan. What'll happen is it's going to give us an estimated scan time, give us the document language, which we can adjust if it has picked the wrong language, and then click scan. From there, it's going to go ahead and do that OCRing. If the document lives in my OneDrive or my Google Drive folder, it's going to write over the old file, replacing it with the new one, which I can then start to engage and interact with. It's taken a little bit extra time because I'm airport on my Wi-Fi. Oh, there it goes. It's going to do it for me. There we go. And it's going to ask me to sign in again quickly. There we go. And it's going to reopen right in screen here in a second. While it's doing this, I'm going to see what got dropped in the chat here. Mike just asked, how does OrbitNote work with an iPad? Mike, that's a great question. Because OrbitNote is a web application where I get to it just from being on the web, I've heard that schools have had success with being able to run, open, engage with PDFs on the iPad. So I've done a little bit of experimenting with it myself, and it tends to work overall. So, yep. This took a couple extra seconds because I'm on some laggy Wi-Fi here in the airport, but as you can see, I can now engage with this PDF. I've got those words and I can engage with it. Okay. And it looks like Matt has a question about OrbitNote working with EPUBs. Matt, great question. Read&Write is actually going to work with EPUBs. So Read&Write's going to cover pretty much all of the content that students are engaging with, we find. OrbitNote is really just for PDF files because of the way that PDFs are created. I can definitely send you some information on the EPUB reader though, if that's helpful. So let me just take a quick shot of that too. So any other questions about OrbitNote? With both tools, I've really just skimmed the surface of what they can do from a capability perspective. Okay. I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to give you a couple second teaser of sort of what are the things that are to come with our tools before I talk about Equatio for a few minutes, okay? So as it relates to where we're going, rewordify and simplify with AI. I showed you the simplify with AI. Both of these are kind of new exciting tools that have gotten built into Read&Write in the last couple of months, which I encourage you to go check out if you haven't already. But it's really changing how students are engaging with our tools as it relates to AI. We're also doing a lot of work around new and improved voices as well in a variety of different kind of ways and improvements. So there's more to come on that in the future as well. I mentioned really being strategic around harnessing the power of AI, which is something that I'm really excited to get to chat with you all and hear your thoughts on in a couple minutes. And one of the other big ones is actually OrbitNote revamp. As I've mentioned a couple times, I've said kind of how OrbitNote looks now. Our OrbitNote development team is undertaking a huge development project with revamping OrbitNote, just so that it's going to be that much better for your students as we move into kind of the tail end of 2024 and into 2025. So things like that dashboard I showed you are going to look really different. The interface is just going to be more modernized and clean. That same toolbar set that I showed you is going to be there. But just know that we're always improving here at Texthelp and really listening to the needs of you all. And then the last one I'd be amiss to mention is data and usage. It's something that I talk to customers about all the time. We're doing huge work and we've made huge strides at Texthelp to get some more transparency for you all around data and usage of our tools. So more to come on that in the months ahead, but know that this is something that we really have spent a lot of effort on as a result of listening to all of you. Okay. All right, let's talk about Equatio for just a couple minutes, show you it, and then we'll get into, again, more of that discussion and question piece, okay? When I work with schools, and I'm sure none of this is new to you all, there's a handful of different challenges we hear when creating STEM-based content. Obviously, making it digital is challenging with the tools that are available out there, wanting to make sure it's easy to create as well. Either if we're putting a tool in the hands of students, faculty, we're working with them to create accessible content or remediate content, as well as just there's a lot on everybody's plates. We don't want to add something that's very complex on top of everything else that students are learning and our faculty are learning every year. Obviously, accessibility is huge to all of us, given the jobs we all do, but then also just the wider ecosystem we work and live in as it relates to higher ed and just our world in general. And then really any tools we adopt in higher ed, we want to make sure are really omnipresent or ubiquitous, just that they really go where we need them to go, they work where we need them to work, and we're not sort of plugging in one tool in this environment and another tool here, which can just be challenging for people to learn and remember how kind of to use these tools. Obviously, buy-in, use, volume, amount, all things that we keep at the top of our head as well. How do we get people to really want to use these tools, but also being mindful that math and STEM content, while obviously math, science, engineering, technology, there are courses really across our institutions that include things like equations and formulas as well. And that's really where Equatio comes in. It gives us the ability to make math and STEM-based course content digital as well as accessible using a toolbar-based tool similar to Read&Write that's going to hang out on the bottom of our screen instead of the top, but allows us to engage and create STEM-based content in a variety of different ways. Much like Read&Write, we've got a variety of different platforms. I'm not going to run through all of them, other than just to say, much like Read&Write, we want to make sure we're meeting you all and your students and your faculty, the places that you feel most comfortable working and with the devices and types that you're coming to campus with. So we've got a Google Chrome extension that works with Google and Office 365 online, as well as all of these other places on the web that I mentioned before, places like Canvas. We do have more of that traditional Equatio for desktop version, much like the Read&Write desktop version. That does have an integration integration with Respondus as well, the Windows desktop version. In case that question comes up, I'll pre-answer it for you. We do also have, similar to OrbitNote, another web app, which just means, again, piece of software that runs on the web. It's called MathSpace. It gives us a little bit more flexibility to create more kind of visual diagram-based course content. And then while the Chrome extension, as well as the desktop version, can work in learning management systems kind of in and of itself, we do have an LTI integration as well that'll work with it as well. Okay. What I really enjoy about Equatio is it gives users a lot of voice and choice, given that it's built on universal design for learning tools and kind of that framework to allow us to do things like create equations and engage with non-equation based content and support things like conversion and the ability to read content and focus on accessibility and universal design for learning. So we're not going to be able to go through each of these, but know that we've plugged tools into these different need areas that we hear from higher education all the time. Okay. Key ways that we see the tool benefiting you all, first and foremost, is student accommodations. You have a student who has a disability which impacts their ability to handwrite course content that's STEM based, or they need course content that needs to be read out loud, and a text-to-speech tool that you have just isn't going to do the trick, or you need something for a peer proctor. This is going to help with that as well. Things like supporting the process of remediation of course content, making that a little bit easier for you all. Getting it into the hands of faculty and students to have it be more of kind of a course pedagogy teaching tool for those online and hybrid courses. And then last up, kind of supporting those wider digital accessibility initiatives as well. I mentioned these other courses that have kind of STEM-based ideas in them, formulas, equations, things like that. So when we think about Equatio, the scope is really wide, not just in things like engineering, but business and finance and accounting and logic and philosophy. I've worked with faculty who have done that, and other subjects and courses, nursing, police, fire, that have some type of formulas and graphs and equation in them. So know that the scope is pretty large. Okay. With that said, let me hop into the questions quick. Looks like there are questions about sharing slides. Thanks for throwing those in there, Mike. Let me quick show you Equatio just for a couple minutes here, okay? So similar to Read&Write, I'm going to use the Chrome extension. If and when I'm ready to start engaging with it, I can go ahead and click on it, and it's going to pop up on the bottom of my screen here. Each of the different buttons here is a different way for me to create or engage with course content. Quickest, fastest, easiest way for me to start creating content is going to be with the equation editor. Everything I do is done by typing. I don't really have to search for anything. I don't have to do something that's more palette based. I can simply do things like type in X for my keyboard, my plus symbol, maybe it's 2y equals 12. And then if and when I'm ready to get this very simplistic equation into my document, I just look for my insert math button, click insert math, and it's going to go ahead and drop that in there for me. Our default way of dropping in content is going to be an image. We do have ways to actually do a different drop-in version, but what the beauty of this is we can actually go into the alternative text, and Equatio's automatically added that in here. We've got both the MathML as well as the spoken text of how that would be read out loud when something like a screen reader or a text-to-speech tool comes across it. It's going to read out loud to me. Okay. We do have a variety of other kind of drop-in methods or different kind of formats that we can output from Equatio. If I were to ever want this X plus 2y equals 12 in a different format, I can click on this copy as math button, and any of these other file formats, I'm able to quickly and easily get out. So for something like remediation, MathML is really key. I can quickly and easily click on that and get the MathML code out and drop that in a document or where I need that, okay? Or LaTeX for faculty who are using LaTeX, okay? Now, I'm sure you're thinking, Rachel, that's a pretty simplistic equation, and you'd be absolutely right. We've got some pretty robust equations and formulas in here. So starting things simplistic, things like quadratic formula, I typed in QUAD and hit the enter key, and in 5 keystrokes, I was able to get the quadratic formula in here. I'm able to adjust and change any of the numbers, variables, integers. I can do things like do multiple lines as well. So if I need to show my work or solve an equation, I can do so. At any point, I can drop it in as well. We've got things that are pretty complex, like correlational coefficient of samples. That's a pretty gnarly complex equations. We've got things that are physics-based, things like speed of light, speed of sound, speed of, periodic wave. And we do have chemistry as well. So if I type in something like SOD for sodium, I've got all of my different compounds that have sodium in them as well. So I can really start to build my course content either as a faculty or as a student to be kind of wherever I need it to be with the course content that I have. Okay. Reading is another big thing that we hear students needing support with, and that's the other tool that I'm going to touch on here. If and when I get into a document like this and I need this content read out loud, I can go ahead and do things like grab my screenshot reader tool. I can go ahead and, much like our screenshot reader tool with Read and Write, if you've seen that, I can grab either just an equation, I can grab a line of text, or I could grab multiple lines of text and have it read out loud to me. Sometimes based on kind of the way computer setup is with laptop and headphone, this you might not be able to hear, even though I've shared my sound. I can definitely follow up with a video if it's helpful. We're going to see if it works. It's going to do that OCRing, and then it's going to read out loud when it gets done doing that OCRing. But when it's taken its time
2
here.
period open paren 5 pts period close paren compute the derivative p prime of y of the function p of y equals the fraction with numerator 2y plus 3 and denominator 7y plus 5 period.
Couple other quick things. I can take this content and do things like copy the LaTeX and grab the MathML and then engage with this content, which as a student makes it, really easy to engage with, whether they're trying to complete an assignment or an exam. Last thing I'll mention, knowing that Canvas is important to you all, is going to be the ability to build this content in Canvas, whether you're a student or whether you're a faculty member. I'm going to reload this page quick to see if we can see it pop up here. So these tools can apply and help kind of the building of accessible course content as well. So as I hover my mouse, we can see that all of this content has that accessibility built in from the ground up. Okay. Janine says, looking for a workflow for faculty used by handwritten notes. Has anyone done a workflow of iPad using Equatio and then Apple Pencil, then uploaded to Canvas? I have not heard of that, but it doesn't mean that someone else hasn't. So if people want to kind of hop into the chat, they can definitely do so. Okay. All right. Let me reshare my screen one more time here. And we can get into much more of kind of the discussion piece of this, which is kind of Emma and I's goal today. Okay. So that being said, we know that higher ed is in a really interesting place right now as it relates to kind of developments and technology and AI. And so because of all this, we'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts about where you see kind of technology being a catalyst and a support for the learners that you're working with, either in your office or across campus. So if people want to come off mute or drop things in the chat, I can definitely read them out loud. But kind of the two things that came to mind first for me was thinking about the developments in the field of assistive technology. What do you think can best support the learners you work with and across campus? And then also, what's top of mind for you and your colleagues as you move towards another academic year as it relates to the needs of your students and supporting them?
Rachel, that was amazing. Really fantastic. I mean, that was a ton of stuff, and thank you so much for covering all of that. The biggest thing for me, like moving to cover on your prompts, is the amount of OER material that we're seeing. We call them ZTC in California, right? They are creating barriers within that OER, inadvertent barriers sometimes, but often not. And so seeing the Texthelp tools in a new light this time around was really nice, just to see like, oh my God, look, these are solutions that we can put in front of our students right now so they can tackle a lot of these OER materials instead of having to go through a process with us, which could speed up the delivery of those things. So what I'm thinking is like, site license structures for read and write. And I know that those are available. Equatio, are those available yet for Equatio as well?
Yeah, so all of our tools come with the ability to do things like a single license, a group license, or a domain license. Obviously, something like a domain license is going to be more in line with kind of that universal design for learning, inclusion, access for everybody, which is what a lot of schools are looking at, especially when we think about kind of that the majority of our students with disabilities aren't disclosing for whatever reason. But that's something that if people reach out to me, I'd be happy to give them more information on and talk about kind of what that looks like for their campus based on their needs.
So if you know what we can talk about real quick is the ATN, the Access Text Network going down recently, really thrown the whole field upside down. And one of the questions that we asked not too long ago to another company was, has there been any, on your end, any idea to move towards publishers to help get content from publishers to accessible versions faster?
So we at Texthelp have not done any proactive outreach in regards to publishers on this issue. I think the big thing is there's so much work being done by a great group of people, as well as the fact that there's so much advocacy from ahead about this as well. I think the key is that, thinking about things like OER, that's going to help with this dramatically as well. So, I mean, if there's something you really feel like we should take back to our internal teams about this, feel free to let us know. And we'd be happy to, talk internally about if there's something we can do and if we have a place in this conversation. But what about AI? What capabilities and functions of AI do you think can best support the learners you work with or kind of learners across campus? Has anyone given thought about that?
Yeah, this semester, I'm the chair of our instructional technology committee, and we wrote some basic guidelines for AI and academic integrity. And one of my concerns is that as colleges decide whether to use AI detection tools, it means that unless a student provides evidence of how they created their paper, the student might be in a situation where they may not be able to come up with the evidence of how they drafted the paper and could be accused of cheating. So as these AI tools are being developed within assistive technology, there has to be some consideration in terms of helping students create drafts and time codes and things like that that would help track that it is their original thought. And they might have used AI for prompting, but not for the complete paper.
That's a great point. I've had a few professionals like yourselves reach out to me and say, hey, my student has gotten caught in this situation where their paper came back and said it was detected by, by an AI detection tool, but they, was using read and write for things like potentially having it read out loud to them, for example. Is there any way that that could have potentially been a trigger? And I've worked with our development team and our product managers and said, there's nothing in read and write right now that would trip off essentially these AI detection tools the way it's built today. So your students are safe with their tools as they are today, but that's something that is really good for us to think about as a team, as our development team, as our product managers are starting to grapple more with what can we add in to meet the needs that you all are talking to us about and sharing with us, because that is something that we don't want students to get caught in the middle of, for sure.
You mentioned ATN, somebody mentioned ATN. I was on a global accessibility day webinar early this morning, and somebody mentioned that they were working on it, that Georgia is thinking about, how they can try to support something, maybe not bringing back the whole ATN, but something in the future, but it wasn't definitive yet.
So from what I've heard from my conversations in the field is that publishers are really wanting this back as well. And I did listen to the AHEAD webinar. If you haven't heard that, I'd encourage you to listen to it. That was done maybe 3 weeks ago now, that talks about kind of what is being done and the resources. So it sounds like people are really doubling down on trying to find a solution ahead of fall semester, because it's been such a supportive resource for all of us. All right, I'll throw the last question out here just because I know that we've got just a couple minutes left with another. Any other ideas or feedback about our tools based on what you saw today? There's a huge hole in the market for doing this or that, or I wish there was a tool that could help my.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, so when we met at CSUN, I wanted to thank you for sharing the OrbitNote web link. One of the biggest issues our students are having is reading their PDFs online with Read and Write. They're choosing the online format and extension over the full version download. And this has been a lifesaver for a lot of our students. So, and I didn't know that that was a part of the Read and Write. So I just thought it wasn't something accessible to our students or to as part of our site license. So I'm very grateful for that. And I just wanted to share with everyone what a big deal that is for our students.
Yeah, I feel like I get on meetings all the time with current users of our tools, and it's like giving them a gift every time. I ask them, like, have you heard of OrbitNote? Do you know what it is? And it's sort of this little held secret for some reason that people just don't know about. And I hear, within a few days typically of, oh my gosh, the student used it and they love it, or we now know the application, or we had no idea this existed. You've really maximized kind of the investment that we have in our software. So if you have access to Read and Write right now, you've got access to OrbitNote as well. So if it's helpful, please send me an email and I can send you resources and information on it as well, just to make sure that you're maximizing what you've got access to.
Brian's point about OrbitNote is great because it is a underutilized tool, and I think not realizing it had all of those features in it. It was really nice to see it showcased here today. So with the structure of the licensing, you've got Read and Write, you get OrbitNote, and you got Equatio. In order to get Orbit or Equatio, you must also have Read and Write. Is that correct?
No, you could get each of them separately. Yep.
Separately?
So kind of the easiest way is Read and Write by itself. You get a kind of version of OrbitNote that has feature parity or the same features that Read and Write has, because we know that students are reading PDF files. You can then choose to add on some extra features to OrbitNote, like it's being able to do that OCR I mentioned, or to take a picture of text and OCR it. Or one of the ones I didn't even mention is you get a subset of the Equatio math tools in OrbitNote to be able to engage with PDFs that have math on them. You could choose to get OrbitNote by itself, without Read and Write if you really wanted to, and then you could also choose to get Equatio by itself as well. But you can mix and match what you have to kind of fit your needs as well.
Great. Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know. So I just put your contact information in the chat.
Right.
Okay. So for anybody who would like to reach out to Rachel to talk about licensing or pricing, anything like that, feel free to send an email, or if you have questions that pop up later. To wrap this session up, I will send out the recording once it's been edited and captioned. So you'll get a notification when the recording is available, as well as Rachel, I'll be glad to pass on to you the registration list of folks that are registered, so that if you wanted to send some follow-up, you can as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd be happy to send out those follow-up emails and the information. I'll do kind of one email based on everything. My clock on my computer is 4 minutes fast, so we're right at 6 o'clock Central Time. But if you do have feedback, that's the only other thing I'd say. Reach out to me. You've got my contact information. We develop our tools based on what you guys need and what you hear students talking about. So don't be shy. Contact me, call me, email me.
Wonderful. Any other last question? Anything? No? Good?
Thanks for having me, everyone. Sorry for the chaotic start.
You handled it like a professional.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. We'll see you soon.